At dawn in rural Georgia, 1838, a plantation overseer found a child standing in the cotton rows. The boy was barefoot, no older than 8. His wrists were scarred, not from rope, but from something tighter, something deliberate. When the overseer shouted at him, the boy answered in English. But when the man grabbed his arm, the child screamed in a language no one recognized. It wasn't African. It wasn't European. It sounded old, broken, like words dragged up from deep water. The overseer later said the boy's eyes didn't beg. They watched, like the child was listening to someone else. By nightfall, the boy was gone. No tracks, no blood, no record. Only a note in the plantation ledger, written smaller than everything else. Another one. Speaks twice. That phrase appears again and again in forgotten Georgia records between 1800 and 1910. Court documents, church logs, orphan intake books, asylum reports, children found enslaved or abandoned, children who spoke 2 languages. One learned, one remembered. None of them were ever taught the second tongue, and none of them stayed. By the 1840s, rumors spread quietly across central Georgia. Not stories told out loud. Stories exchanged in glances. Warnings folded into prayer. Planters whispered about double-voiced children. Preachers warned of borrowed mouths. Midwives refused to speak of births that lasted too long. The language itself had patterns. It surfaced during fear, pain, sleep. Witnesses said the children didn't speak it. They fell into it. The sounds rolled backward. Some words repeated in threes. Others ended in gasps, like something was cutting them off. One Methodist minister wrote in 1851, "When the girl spoke, the air grew heavy. The candles bent. I felt as though the room remembered something before we did." Linguists never studied it, because officially it didn't exist. Every report that mentioned it was crossed out. Every sermon transcript that quoted it was burned. Every child who spoke it was transferred, relocated, or quietly buried. The language had no alphabet, no written form, only memory. And memory, in Georgia, was dangerous. In 1864, during the chaos of the Civil War, a small church-run orphan house opened on Red Clay Road. It was meant for war orphans. But its intake records tell another story. Children arrived with no names, no birthplaces, no known parents, only ages, and a single recurring note. Responds to instruction. Speaks during night hours. Staff reported sleepwalking episodes. Group murmuring. Children sitting upright at exactly the same time each night. Always at 3:17 a.m. One caretaker quit after 2 weeks. Her written statement was sealed until 1932. It reads, "They speak together, but not to each other. It's like they're answering something that isn't here. When I asked who taught them, they said, we didn't learn it. We woke up with it." In 1867, the orphan house burned down. No investigation. No survivors listed. But church records show 6 children were removed the night before. Destination, unknown. There is an older layer to this story. Older than plantations. Older than slavery. Older than Georgia itself. Before maps, before counties, before churches, there were beliefs about borrowed children. Not possessed, not cursed. Remembering. The idea was simple and terrifying. Some children are born carrying memory that does not belong to them. Memory from before. Memory from below. Memory from a time when the land demanded voices. The belief said these children would speak when the land called back. And when too many remembered at once, something answered. That belief never appears in official history, but it appears in actions. Why churches hid children? Why institutions moved them at night? Why records in mid-sentence? Because Georgia didn't just find these children. Georgia was afraid of what they remembered. And this is only the beginning. In 1872, a closed meeting took place in Milledgeville. No public notice, no minutes, no names recorded, but letters between church leaders, judges, and state physicians confirm it happened. They called it a matter of social stability. Privately, they called it the children problem. Reports had grown too frequent to ignore. Children found on plantations who knew hymns they were never taught. Children in orphanages whispering words that caused adults to feel dizzy. Children who screamed in a second language while being punished, then fell silent forever. One judge wrote, "If this continues, we risk not rebellion, but remembrance." That word appears again, remembrance. The council agreed on 3 things. The language must never be named. The children must never gather. The public must never know. Their solution wasn't prisons. It was institutions. By 1881, Georgia quietly expanded state-run asylums and religious schools. Official purpose: behavioral correction and moral instruction. Unofficial purpose: containment. Children who spoke incorrectly were removed from families. Churches were encouraged to report night speaking. Doctors were told to observe, not cure. Inside these institutions were rooms not marked on blueprints. Bare walls. No windows. Floors scrubbed daily. Children were placed inside and told to repeat English prayers. When they slipped into the other language, the sessions restarted. Again, and again, and again. Doctors noted something strange. The more the language was suppressed, the stronger it returned. Children began speaking it in unison, even when separated. Some stopped using English entirely. Others developed nosebleeds, night terrors, sudden knowledge of events they were never present for. One physician resigned in 1893, writing, "We are not correcting behavior. We are silencing witnesses." In 1899, the town of Pine Hollow vanished from newspapers. Not destroyed, not abandoned, just absent. Earlier that year, Pine Hollow had taken in 12 children from surrounding counties. All shared the same note. Speaks twice. Residents complained of strange sounds at night. Low chanting. Windows rattling without wind. Then, one night in October, everything stopped. No dogs barking. No church bell at dawn. No smoke from chimneys. A traveling salesman arrived 2 days later. He found meals set on tables. Shoes by doors. Beds slept in. But no people. State officials ruled it a relocation due to illness. No records show where the people went. What does survive is a torn page from the town schoolhouse. They told us to stop remembering. The children said it was too late. Across all surviving testimonies, one question was asked again and again. Who taught you the other language? The answers were always similar. No one. It was already there. We didn't learn it. We woke up with it. But one answer appears only once, in a sealed church confession from 1907. A girl, age 9, said, "We are not speaking another language. We are finishing a sentence." That confession ends abruptly. The page after it is blank. The priest who recorded it left the church the same week and never spoke publicly again. By the early 1900s, Georgia believed it had contained the problem. But memory doesn't fade. It waits. And in the next part, the story reaches the point where control breaks completely. When children disappear before institutions can take them. Around 1912, something changed. Reports didn't stop, but captures did. Children were no longer being found by overseers or priests. They were no longer arriving at orphan houses. Instead, families woke up to empty beds. No signs of struggle. No footprints. No goodbye notes. Just silence. In several cases, parents reported the same detail. The children had been awake the night before. Sitting up. Listening. One mother said her son whispered words she almost understood. Not English. Not the other language exactly. Something in between. After that night, the children were gone. State officials believed the stories were exaggerated, until entire groups vanished at once. A review of railroad manifests from 1910 to 1925 reveals something unsettling. Certain trains ran with empty passenger lists. No tickets sold. No freight listed. But guards were paid. And stops were skipped. Internal memos refer to these routes as youth relocation. Churches were told the children were being sent north. Families were told they were adopted. Local papers were told nothing. But the children never arrived anywhere. And then there are the tracks that end. Literally. Rail lines that stop suddenly in forests. In swamps. Near red clay fields with no towns nearby. Places locals avoided. Places where people said the ground hummed at night. In 1931, a road crew outside Macon uncovered human remains. Small skeletons. Dozens of them. No coffins. No markers. Just arranged in circles. Hands folded. Mouths open. The discovery was sealed within hours. The official explanation: unmarked burial ground. Origin unknown. But one photograph survived. On the back, written faintly. They were listening when they died. No records show who buried them. But church correspondence from the same year mentions the final silence effort. That phrase never appears again. By the late 1930s, the reports stop. No more bilingual children. No more night speaking. No more disappearances. Georgia declared the matter resolved. But one final document exists. A psychiatric intake from 1947. A boy, age 11, found wandering barefoot. No injuries. No history. Under language, the doctor wrote. English, fluent. Other, present. When asked where he learned it, the boy answered, "We don't need to remember anymore. It remembers us now." The intake ends there. No discharge. No death record. Just a stamped word across the file. Closed. There was never an official translation. But there were interpretations. Clergy, doctors, and scholars who heard fragments of the second language all reported the same thing. Not meaning, but function. They believed the language was not used to communicate. It was used to wake something. The structure of the speech didn't describe objects or ideas. It repeated positions, directions, intervals of time. One physician wrote that it sounded like instructions being read aloud. Another compared it to calling roll. The most disturbing theory came from a suppressed seminary paper written in 1918. The language does not summon entities. It restores attention. It reminds the land of its witnesses. In other words, the language wasn't calling something new. It was reminding something old that it was still being watched. Church records show sudden closures on certain dates. No explanation. No emergencies. Just locked doors. The dates repeat across counties and denominations. Always the same. Late March. Early August. Mid-November. When cross-referenced with older agricultural calendars, those dates align with periods once believed to be listening seasons. Times when the ground was thought to carry voices better. On those nights, bells were not rung. Prayers were shortened. Children were kept inside. One priest admitted in a private letter, "If they speak together on those nights, we cannot stop what answers." Survey maps from the 1800s show blank spaces. Not errors. Intentional omissions. Areas with no labels. No roads. No towns. But modern satellite imagery shows disturbances. Unnatural circles in the soil. Tree growth bending outward. No animal tracks. Locals call these places quiet fields. People avoid them without knowing why. And sometimes, children wander toward them. In every recorded case, they go willingly. By the 1940s, Georgia didn't need institutions anymore. The children stopped appearing. Not because the memory was gone, because it had moved. The final internal memo from a state archive reads, "We are no longer the point of convergence," meaning whatever the language was meant to finish. It no longer needed Georgia. The last line of the memo is handwritten, shaky. "If they are remembering somewhere else, we should pray it is not here again." Modern Georgia doesn't talk about bilingual children, but it talks about disappearances, runaways, missing kids, unexplained cases that fade from news too fast. Sometimes it's a single child. Sometimes it's two. Sometimes it's a group. Always at night. Always without noise. Always without struggle. Parents describe the same pattern. The child wasn't afraid. The child wasn't confused. The child seemed ready. Sitting up. Quiet. Listening. People think it's coincidence. But patterns don't disappear. They change shape. The second language was never about escape. It was about timing. The children weren't remembering the past. They were remembering the sequence. Not who they were. Not where they came from. But when. Like a countdown. Like a pattern being followed across generations. Each child holding a piece. Each voice a fragment. Not a message. A schedule. One hidden document describes it as a distributed memory system carried in bloodlines, activated by land and trauma. Simple meaning. The memory passes through families. Through fear. Through suffering. Through silence. Until enough children remember at once. Across all records, all testimonies, all fragments, one structure repeats. Not words. Not meanings. Structure. 3 rising sounds. A pause. A long falling tone. Then silence. Linguists call it a closing cadence. Like the end of a ritual. Like the end of a command. Like the end of a door being opened. The children weren't starting something. They were finishing it. Completing something interrupted long ago. Something buried. Something sealed. Something the land itself was made to forget. The truth isn't that Georgia hid enslaved children. The truth is darker. Georgia tried to stop a memory that didn't belong to any one people. A memory older than slavery. Older than churches. Older than borders. A memory tied to land, trauma, and voices. The children weren't possessed. They weren't cursed. They weren't broken. They were carriers. Not of language. Of sequence. Of timing. Of something unfinished. And when they spoke together, something listened. And when they disappeared, It meant the listening had moved. The final line in the last surviving record says, "Silence does not mean absence. It means waiting."